Hello everyone, welcome to Foundation of Translation. My name is Tuần. I'm a teacher of Tuần University. My major is teaching and doing research on translation, interpreting and translation theories. I've been working in this field for 17 years now. Now it's my pleasure to present you with the overview of translation. Firstly, let me tell you what is expected in this subject. As you may know, Foundation of Translation is the first subject in the series of the 3 subjects of translation. It is structured into 2 parts. Part 1 provides you with the theoretical knowledge of translation, while Part 2 offers you the opportunities to practice translating some kinds of sentences and structures. Regarding the outcomes, first, in terms of knowledge, the course enables you to understand the fundamental knowledge of translation theories. Then, about skills, it helps you to apply the theoretical knowledge into use by practicing translating some particular structures between the 2 languages. Finally, about attitudes, through the study of theories and practice of knowledge, you are expected to build up good professional ethics, be able to work independently to acquire knowledge and skills to meet the demand of the professional work. Now, regarding the contents of the course, about theories, the course provides you with basic concepts of translation, from different approaches, common terms in the field, some factors that may affect the translation process. 1/3 of our class time will be devoted to the study of theories. Then, you will have 2/3 of your time spent on the practice of translation. Now, in this course, you will have the opportunity to practice translation of passive sentences. You will know how you should translate non-subject sentences from Vietnamese into English. You'll be aware of the strategies to deal with non-equivalence at word levels. And finally, you will learn and practice the translation of headlines. Hello everyone, welcome to the first lecture of Foundation of Translation. My name is Tuần and it's my pleasure to present you with the overview of translation. Now let's start with a kind of warming up activity. Please have a look at the statements. Use your own knowledge and understanding to decide if the following statements are true or false. Now let's spend some minutes for silent reading and marking true or false. Now, let's go through the objectives of the lesson. First, the lesson will help you to understand and compare the definitions of translation. Secondly, you will understand and remember the importance and the history of translation. Also, the lesson helps you to understand, remember, and apply the principles of translation. And finally, you will be able to understand, remember, and apply the basic concepts of translation studies. Now, let's look at the content of the lesson. There are 6 main parts in this lesson. In the first part, we discuss the definitions of translation. The importance of translation will be mentioned in the second part. The third part is about the history of translation, and you will be provided knowledge of principles of translation in the fourth part. Next, we talk about the basic concepts, and finally, code of ethics. Let's start with the definitions of translation. So, what is translation? Well, if you search on internet or if you look at books of translation studies, you may find hundreds or thousands of different definitions of translation. But Here we have the most common definitions of translation. So now let's look at the definitions one by one and find out what translation is. Firstly, translation refers to the transfer of a message from one language to another in the written form or by means of writing. Chúng ta sẽ nghiên cứu cái khái niệm, cái định nghĩa đầu tiên về biên dịch. Thế nào là biên dịch? Thì có rất là nhiều cái khái niệm, những cái cách định nghĩa khác nhau. Chúng ta có thể tìm thấy hàng trăm cái cách định nghĩa. Tuy nhiên ở đây là những cái cách định nghĩa mà phổ biến và được chấp nhận rộng rãi nhất. Thì định nghĩa đầu tiên nói rằng là dịch đó là việc chúng ta truyền tải một cái thông điệp từ một ngôn ngữ này sang một ngôn ngữ khác bằng cái hình thức viết, in the written form or by means of writing. The second definition said that translation refers to the interpretation of the meaning of a text in one language, which is called the source language, and the production of an equivalent text in another language that communicates the same message. Đây là cái cách định nghĩa thứ hai, nói rằng dịch đó là việc chúng ta diễn giải nghĩa của một cái văn bản trong một ngôn ngữ này, ngôn ngữ gốc mà chúng ta gọi là source language, và cái việc tái tạo lại một cái văn bản tương đương trong một cái ngôn ngữ khác mà ta gọi là target language, sao cho cái văn bản nguồn hay là cái bản dịch đó nó phải truyền đạt được cái thông điệp giống như văn bản gốc muốn truyền đạt. Next, we can understand translation as the expression in one target language of what has been expressed in source language, preserving semantic and stylistic equivalences. Cách định nghĩa này thì lại khác biệt, đó là coi dịch là việc chúng ta diễn đạt bằng cái ngôn ngữ đích những cái gì mà đã được diễn đạt trong ngôn ngữ nguồn, sao cho chúng ta giữ nguyên được những cái giá trị tương đương về ngữ nghĩa và về văn phong, về phong cách. And finally, translation is also considered the rendering of a written text into another language in the way that the author intended the text. Cách định nghĩa cuối cùng mà chúng ta bàn đến ở đây đó là việc truyền tải một cái văn bản viết sang một ngôn ngữ mới theo cái cách mà tác giả đã định sẵn ở trong văn bản, tác giả muốn thể hiện ở trong văn bản. So, these are the most common definitions of translation. If we look at the definitions and we pay attention to the letters, to the words in red, we may find out that they have something in common, is it? So let's look at the components of translation definitions. Now, in each definition, we find at least 3 components. The first one is a text. A text, it means a message in the written form. And we have 2 languages, one source language and the other language, the target language. And the 2 texts must convey the same message or the same meaning. So we can say that these are the 3 most important components of translation definitions. So, how translation is important? Why are we talking about translation? Well, translation acts as a means of communication. So, translators are there to help when there is difficulty in communicating, when people of different languages want to communicate with each other, when people of different languages want to share their opinions, their ideas and the knowledge to people of other languages. Secondly, translation is also a transmitter of culture. When doing translation work, the translator is conveying the culture to another language, to another culture. Importantly, translation is also a technique of learning, of language learning. And finally, from the personal perspective, translation is also the source of personal pleasure. Translators they are self-motivated to do the translation work, and they find satisfaction in doing the work, in broadening their knowledge and finding new knowledge and experiences. Now, let's talk about the history of translation. How old is translation? Well, we cannot be sure, but the first trace of translation appear around 3,000 years BC in the Egyptian Old Kingdom, and the significant fact there appeared in the West in 300 BC in Luther's Bible translation, somewhere around 1522. And then in the 16th century, translation became the weapon in both dogmatic and political conflicts, and it was no longer secondary activity. The 17th century witnessed a blooming in theorists of translation. In the 18th century, translation studies focused on target readership with the development of new theories. The next century, the focus was on classic argument between word-for-word or sense-for-sense translation. And now the modern time, since the 20th century, translation has experienced its age of translation and interpreting. We see the upheaval of international agreements, new international bodies, independent states, multinational companies, the development of international organizations, and so on. Now let's look at the principles of translation. So what does and what must a translator do? Well, firstly, a good translator must fully understand the sense and meaning of the original text. But the translator should be able to clarify obscurities. Also, the translators are required to have a perfect knowledge of both the source language and the target language, and also the source text, the source culture and the target culture. Now they work between the two languages, between the two cultures. So translators are, of course, bilingual. It means the translator must be able to speak two different languages as fluently as native speakers. Also, translators should avoid word-for-word rendering. Word-for-word rendering is one of the methods of translation that we will discuss later, but it is only a method for non-speaker only. It is to help people learn language, not a real method of translation. So translators should be aware of word-for-word method and try to avoid word-for-word renderings. The translators are, it is advisable for translators to use forms of speech in common use, the language that is acceptable and comprehensible to the common reader of the target language. And finally, the translators should be able to choose and order words appropriately to produce the correct tone, which is intended as the source language or as the source text. That is what the translators must do. And now let's look at the basic concepts of translation study. We have some common concepts that are not commonly or widely used in many studies of translation. The first one is source text. It refers to the text to be translated. It is also known as foreign text, original text, or star text. Okay. Khái niệm đầu tiên chúng ta cần nhớ đến cái đó là source text hay là văn bản nguồn, đó là văn bản mà chúng ta cần phải dịch. Nó có một số cái tên gọi khác như là original text, start text, vân vân. Secondly, target text, abbreviated as TT or TLT, it refers to the translated text and also known as production of translation. Khái niệm thứ hai cũng còn được gọi là production of translation, đó là target text hay là văn bản đích. Khi mà chúng ta thảo luận về dịch, chúng ta luôn luôn nói đến văn bản nguồn và văn bản đích, source text and target text. We also have the source language, which is the language from which the text is translated, and the target language, the language you have to translate into. The source culture refers to the culture where the text has to be translated, has been produced. Ở đây chúng ta có source language, ngôn ngữ nguồn, target language, ngôn ngữ đích. Tương tự như vậy thì source culture là văn hóa nguồn và chúng ta cũng sẽ có target culture, văn hóa đích. Now, let's look at other concepts. Target culture. It means the culture you have to translate as a text for, or the culture of the recipient of the translated text. Chúng ta vừa nhắc đến cái khái niệm này rồi, đó là văn hóa đích. The recipient of translation or the target reader, that is the person for whom the translation is intended. Đây là người tiếp nhận cái văn bản hay tức là người đọc văn bản, người đọc bản dịch của chúng ta. Equivalence is a big concept in translation. It's a very broad concept which states that the source text and the target text have approximately the same reference. Đây là một cái khái niệm rất là lớn trong dịch, equivalence, sự tương đương. Sự tương đương có nhiều cái cách mà định nghĩa khác nhau, nhưng chung quy thì nó sẽ có điểm tương đồng, đó là cái tiêu chí về sự tương đương. Nó yêu cầu là văn bản nguồn và văn bản đích nó phải có cái nội dung và nó phải chỉ cùng một thứ giống nhau. We will also talk about the co-text and context. The co-text refers to the text that go directly before and after the text. And context, it means the concrete situation of language use and the things being done with language. So we see the two different concepts, right? Ở đây chúng ta sẽ thấy có hai cái khái niệm mà đôi khi bị lẫn lộn với nhau là co-text và context. Co-text đó là cái đoạn văn bản mà nó đứng trực tiếp đằng trước và đằng sau của cái đoạn văn bản mà chúng ta đang thực hiện, chúng ta đang tìm hiểu. Còn context chúng ta hay gọi nó là ngữ cảnh, đúng không ạ? Ngữ cảnh đó là cái bối cảnh, cái tình huống cụ thể mà chúng ta đang sử dụng ngôn ngữ và là những cái việc mà được thực hiện bằng cái ngôn ngữ đó, gọi là context. Chị dừng một xíu nhé. And now, let's talk about the codes of ethics. What are required as a translator? Well, there are many skills and qualities that are needed from a translator. What are many expectations from a translator? Firstly, the translator must ensure accuracy and completeness. They should be able to select and use suitable language with no addition or alteration or omission of ideas and opinions. The second requirement to translator is confidentiality. It means that the translator cannot disclose information, cannot tell anyone the information included in their translation text. Impartiality of egotism is the next requirement, or it is also known as professional detachment. The translator are not allowed to take sides or say if one of the two parties, one of two sides is correct or not. No conflict of interest. There should be no disclosure of conflict, which is also rather similar to confidentiality. And finally, the translator is responsible to improve his or her own skill and knowledge and don't accept assignments beyond their training without any training or knowledge. And now, let's have some practice. Now, read the text carefully and fill in the blank with one suitable word. And now, some more practice with the concepts, with the basic concepts. Now, could you match the terms on the left with the meanings on the right? Now, look at the following text. Can you identify the context? What is the text about? We have gone through the definitions of translation, the importance. We have gone through the definitions of translation, the importance of translation, how does it help, and the stages in the translation history, the different stages of development in the history of translation. What does a translator do? The key concepts in translation studies, and finally we discuss the code of ethics required for translator. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.